There are 3 study mistakes that every single low-performing and average student does that results in them doing so bad in their exams and just staying the same forever. And most likely you are making the exact same mistakes as I did from year 7 all the way to year 10. In fact, most people I know make these mistakes because the truth is your school never ever teaches you how to study. So in this video, I'm going to go over what these 3 mistakes are and how to avoid them. No BS, no long explanations. I'm going to get right to the point. So get your pen and paper ready and always remember this. You never learn something unless you take action. So I might go over the mistakes in this video. If you don't go ahead and actually fix these mistakes, you're going to stay the exact same, okay? But let me just tell you one last time. These mistakes are costing you. These mistakes are the reason why you're not doing well in your exams, and these mistakes will be the reason why you don't achieve your dream ATAR. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Mistake number 1 is the obvious, which is passive study. Now, I've spoken about this in depth in other videos. I'm going to make even more videos on this, but passive studying results in most people failing exams. Now, what is passive studying? Passive studying is where you just put information into your brain, but you never take it out. In other words, you read, you watch videos, you highlight. Now, when you study like this on a neuroscience level, the information does not stay in your head. For example, I can challenge you right now. Do you ever walk into an exam feeling like you know the content, feeling confident, feeling like, you know what, I'm good to go? Yet when you actually get into the exam, you either blank out and you have no idea what to do, or you walk out of the exam pretty much being like, yeah, I failed that thing. Or you feel like you've done well after the exam, but you get your exam back and you still did terrible. Does this sound like you? I know it happened to me, right? And one of the biggest reasons why this happens is because your studying is passive, meaning you just read the textbook, you just take notes, right? You know, your pretty notes that you have, like, you know, I put it on the screen right now, these type of pretty notes that you do and you feel so productive. They're the worst type of way of studying. Reading notes, highlighting, rewriting things, watching videos, they are the worst ways to study for your exams. They result in short-term retention. They result in the feeling of competence, meaning you feel like you know your stuff. But guess what? You literally forget everything within the next few hours and within the next few days. It's that simple. So you need to stop passively studying. How do you do this? It's pretty simple. Once you have learnt the information, once you have read the information, now let me just make something very clear, by the way. I'm not saying you can't read a textbook. I'm not saying you can't take notes. I'm not saying you can't watch videos. I did all of these things, but you need to understand the process of learning. It starts with passive studying to take in the information. But the problem with you is once you take in the information, you don't do anything with the information and it just falls. So what you need to be doing is you take in the information, passive studying. That's where you can read books. That's where you can write notes. That's when you can watch videos. I did all of those things, by the way. But here's the key right here, right? Let me just put my fist here. The key here is once you've taken that information passively, you need to consolidate that information. How? By active recall. This is where you test yourself on that information. So if I've just learned the process of DNA replication, instead of just taking notes, let's say, for example, I've taken notes on DNA replication, I've learned it, I've watched videos, I understand it. Don't just stop there. You now want to test yourself on the information. How? There's multiple methods, but one way of doing that is using flashcard apps like Anki, for example. Anki is a flashcard app where you type in a question relating to the information, and then it tests you on that information using spaced repetition. It's a very, very effective method. But even if you want to use an app like Anki or a flashcard app, even just simply testing yourself, like literally covering the book and just recalling the information. By doing this, by actually using active recall, whether that's through Anki, whether that's through typing up the questions, or whether that's through recalling it from memory, saying it out loud, that's how you're going to consolidate the information. And that's how you're going to guarantee that you know the information. Because if you test yourself on something and you're able to successfully answer it, you know it. So that's the first study mistake, passive studying. The way to fix it is so easy. Once you've learned something by taking notes or by watching videos, that's fine. You must test yourself in the information. That's the first mistake. The second biggest study mistake is relying on flashcards. Now, this might seem controversial to what I just said, because you just said, you might be thinking, but bro, you just said to use flashcards and active recall to remember the information. Yeah, but the problem is some students rely on flashcards so much that they treat it as if it's their second brain. And I've seen this in my own eyes. I once had a student come up to me and be like, hey, so I use Anki, like you said. I'm reviewing it every day. I'm using it every day. Yet I still got 70% of my exam. What's happening? Then when I spoke to him more, we jumped on a call. Took me like 5 minutes to realize this. The problem was that the guy only did Anki cards. And the second problem was he memorized the information, but he did not understand the information. And this is why relying on flashcards is so dangerous. This is why relying on Anki is so dangerous, because if you just rely on it to memorize things without understanding the thing you're memorizing, then you can't do well in an exam, because exams don't test your memorization only. If it did, everyone can get a 95 plus ATAR because you're just memorizing things, but they also test your understanding. And you know what? I'm going to add on top of this, because the second mistake was relying on flashcards, but I'm going to put a slash, not understanding the information. You cannot just memorize things without understanding and expect to do well in the exam. And this is why relying on flashcards is so dangerous, because if you were to use Anki right now, if you were to use the flashcard app right now, you can memorize everything without understanding what the hell you're memorizing. But the problem with that is you're not going to be able to answer those exam questions that actually test your understanding, which is going to result in what? Result when you're doing average, if not failing. So do not rely on flashcards. Use them as a tool after you've understood the information. The third study mistake is delaying past papers. This is so sad to see, because like it is such an easy tweak you can do that will significantly increase your results. If you delay past papers, you're never going to do well in an exam, because the best study method, the ultimate best, greatest of all time study method is doing past papers. Because at the end of the day, you are preparing for an exam. So if you're preparing for the exam, the best way to prepare for an exam is to do practice exams. The best way to prepare for a boxing match is by sparring, and etc. Same thing with exams, right? You need to stop delaying past papers. Stop treating it like this big thing that, oh my goodness, I can only do once I've finished all the information and taken all my notes and done all the... Don't do that. Start past papers the minute you have understood a topic. For example, let's say, and I'm going to give you a live example of this, right? Let's say, for example, you're doing biology and you've just learned DNA replication. Now that you've learned DNA replication, instead of just moving on and not caring and just taking notes, or even just doing flashcards, do past paper questions, targeted past paper questions on DNA replication. Like, I'm not joking. If you were to just do past paper questions and targeted questions after learning every topic, how can you not do well in an exam? You can't. Like, you will do well in an exam. And this is even more important for math, right? In math especially, you never ever want to delay past papers. Jump into them straight away, okay? So that's the third biggest mistake that students make. It's delaying past papers. You know, a lot of people, they'd like to do everything before they do the past papers, but don't do that. Get started in straight away, reflect from each past paper, and that's how you're going to guarantee you do well in your exams. So there you have it. Those are the three biggest study mistakes that students make that result in them staying low performing, staying average, and doing terrible in their exams. Now, there's honestly many more study mistakes, but these three you can get fixed right now. And just to recap, number one is passive studying, which is just studying by taking notes, watching videos, rereading, highlighting. Second mistake is relying on flashcards to the extent where you don't understand the information, but you're just memorizing it, or just in general, not understanding the information. And then third thing is delaying past papers, where you do past papers 1 to 2 days before an exam, or even a week before the exam. Don't do that. Start them as soon as possible. And that way you can guarantee that not only do you know the information, but you can also fix any mistakes that you have before your exam. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, let me know if you have any questions down in the comment down below. And one last thing is, if you are a low performing student right now who wants to make a comeback and achieve that 90 plus ATAR, check the first link in the description. I have a free training for you that explains the process of how we at Dux Academy take literally low performing, failing students to achieving straight A's, 90 plus ATAR, 95 plus ATAR, 97 plus ATAR, literally within a few months, right? So check that first link. It is the fastest way that you can succeed, and I'll see you in the next one.